Hey, knitters! Welcome to episode 181 of the Knitty McPurly podcast. I'm your host, Devin You can find me at KnittyMcPurly.com. I am Knitty McPurly on Instagram, and if you want to email me, I am Devin at KnittyMcPurly.com. Welcome to this incredibly beautiful worldwide Knit in Public Day. Who knew? Who knew that this was even a thing? I tend to have my head in a pot of yarn or an elementary school math book or whatever else. And I miss these things. And so I'm so grateful to my friend Lori, hi Lori, who said, hey Devin, we're meeting up at the winery for the Worldwide Knit in Public Day. Do you think maybe you could come? I was like, of course, it's a mile from my house. So probably you're going to see this later, and probably you live 1,000 miles away, but if you are close, and if you happen to be one of the first watchers, come join me at the winery, the Sunshine Ridge Winery. Information is on my website at 3 o'clock today. Going to be so fun. We're going to knit in public. It's going to be awesome. I am drinking some fizzy water out of my Maryland mug from my lovely friend Melissa, who I'm going to see today. She lives in Maryland, so it's not too far. Virginia and Maryland are buddies. So I'll see her today at the winery. If you don't live close, I hope you can get out and knit in public. Coffee shop or your front porch or baseball game. Wherever you're headed today, take your knitting. If this has passed, if it passes you by, then you're in good company, because this is the first time I've ever been on top of it. Like, how do you even, do I have to Google it to find out when it is? Are there other days I need to know about? I don't know. Everything has a day now. Who started it? Who's in charge of it? I don't know. It's a gorgeous day today. It's like 80 and sunny and breezy, and it's not even too humid. In Virginia, we get a lot of humidity, so it's always nice when it's not too humid. So I am wearing my wildflower tee. Could not think of what it was called last time I talked about it. But I love it. I've got it on with these kind of high-waisted shorts, and I think that this whole outfit has kind of a retro 70s vibe to it. I just love it. This is the Wildflower Tee by Cheryl of Wise Owl Knits. I changed it a little bit. I talked about that on previous podcasts, but I love it. It reminds me of the Pennsylvania Dutch hex signs that I love so much. These colors with the white background. I just love it. There's no birds on it. I forget what those birds are called. They're not chickens. I don't know. But it still makes me think of that. This is a great time of year for me. And part of that is because I am at the pool with my swimmers most days, twice a day. Most days there are 2 practices per day. So I'm at the pool a lot with my swimmers, and so I get a lot of knitting done. And that's really nice because I'm working on the Summer Vibe Cal, which I will talk about in a minute. Okay, progress and shop news. Knitty McPurly is growing, you guys. I am at a point where I'm busting at the seams in terms of my business size, which is so great. Thank you so, so much. The downside to the place where I am right now is I feel like it's taking longer for you to get your order. Used to be, I would ship same day and you'd have it in like 2 days. But with the volume of orders that I have and the staff size that I have and their availability, it has been hard. The thing that holds me back the most is electricity, because to plug in a double burner, it takes so much electricity. And so even though I have, 12 of them, I can't plug them all in at the same time. And so that's the next thing that we're going to be looking at. I was also stuck with really slow water. The faucet that came with my awesome sink. I have a really amazing sink that my husband put in for me. It's giant. And I have a lot of space. I've got a great dyeing area. I've got a great office area, but the water would come out so slow and it would take forever. And so I got my plumber, my husband, to get me a new faucet and to put it in, and the water just gushes out of there. It is so fast. So that was the first thing. That was a super easy fix. That was like a $30 fix. Getting more electricity is a much more expensive fix, but that's next. Also, I have taken on an almost full-time employee now that she is done with school, and that is Gigi. Gigi is now scanning yarn and packing orders. So if you got some orders, hopefully it all looks good. I'm not checking them. I just told her how to do it. And I said, if you have a question, come and ask me, but hopefully everything came just as you ordered it. She's a wonderful employee. She does amazing work. Everything she does is beautiful. My 2 oldest children are like that. Everything they do is great. But still, they're kids. So yeah, but it is great because I really need the help. Hopefully the orders will turn around a little faster now that I've got her all the time. During the school year, she just didn't have as much time to give me. So anyway, the advent calendars, you guys, they sold out in record time. I have never had, I've never done 2 batches of pre-orders before. I've always put out, a number that I feel comfortable doing. And I've played with that over the years, like what number is a good amount. And then it takes a week or 2 for them to sell out. Well, this year it took 3 days for me to sell out. So I put up another batch of pre-orders. If you want an advent calendar, this is the last time I'm going to talk about it until, we get there. If you want an advent calendar, the theme is Creator of the Universe, and it's going to be based on all of the great pictures from the James Webb Telescope, because God created all that stuff. It's going to be a fade of 25 20-gram minis. So that's 500 grams of yarn. Each mini skein is just under 100 yards. It's like 94 yards. So the total yardage for the whole advent calendar is 2,315 yards. So that's a sweater quantity. If you wanted to make a sweater, you could do a shawl, you could do several pairs of socks, you could do whatever you want, but it will be a fade that's going to go from dark to light because Jesus is the light of the world. Just so many metaphors. It just sings on so many levels. It's going to be great. Many, many of you picked yours up. There are more in the shop right now if you want to go get them. If you didn't get one already and you want to get one, please go order it now because they're selling faster than I thought. So it will also include a scrappy download from Knitty McPurly because I do have several shawls that this would work for. And I'll probably include the diggery pattern in there too because it's anything you could make with it. I'll include as an option for your free pattern. You can pick your pattern. Of course, you can make whatever you want. There's a lot of great options out there. They ship mid-November, but I do tend to be early, so it'll probably be closer to the beginning of November because I like, people to have it on time. You don't want any shipping delays or anything to cause it to be late. So that is that. Also, I wanted to show you again June's color of the month. Gigi did this. Gigi skeined it, labeled it. Got the label on there. She did such a good job. So this is June's color of the month. It's got all manner of speckles and a beautiful pink mini skein. Oh, and also the porch balm is up in the shop. Many, many, many of you went and ordered yourself one. It smells so good. This one is mine. It smells so good. So I'm gonna just put it on the backs of my hands here. It smells, it's such a good smell. It is geranium and lavender mostly. And then it also has a hint of lemongrass and a hint of clove. And the reason I chose all of those scents is that bugs don't like them. So I have found that the bugs do not like the smell of the balm, and hopefully they will leave us alone this summer as we are sitting outside. So I always get, Gigi and I always keep the ones, like if there's a speck in it, this one you can almost, like it's almost indistinguishable, but we keep the ones that are imperfect for our own use. So that is really nice. But if you want one, go grab one. Okay, so the summer vibe knit-along is happening. Here again is my first finished and blocked side to my sweater. I just love it so much. I am almost done with the second side. It looks a little ridiculous because it's tiny before you block it, before the lace has opened up. I'm in the middle of a row here. but I am on the last stripe, the barrel stripe. And then after that, I'm going to switch to the 2x2 rib, which is what I did on the bottom here. I don't know what the pattern calls for. It might be a 2x2, I'm not sure. Very excited. I will be on time for this knit along. If you're joining us and doing the knit along, the new date is June 20th, first day of summer to finish. So hopefully you can finish in time. You do, if you got a kit from me, you will have yarn left over. So I have some yarn, and I'm going to be talking about my leftovers and what I plan to do with them towards the end in Knitting Fantasies. How is it mid-June? I don't even know how we got here. It is June 8th. I guess that's not mid-June, but it's well into June. Like, that's just crazy talk. I'm sorry about that noise. That's the fan. Can you hear that? Should I turn it off? You can't answer me. So anyway, I'm going to turn it off. What I'm mostly thinking about right now is, what am I going to knit next? Like, once this is done, what am I going to knit? Am I going to be good and finish a languishing whip? Or will it be a new cast on? I'm leaning pretty heavily towards new cast on right now. That's kind of how I'm feeling. I feel that you need to knit what makes you happy and what fills you with joy. And if your languishing whips make you want to jump off a building, then just leave them there. Let them languish. They've been there long enough. They'll keep a little bit longer. So I've got some ideas, and I'll talk about that during Knitting Fantasies. On to your comments. Throughout the week, I normally write down the things that come into my mind. And I had tons of things come into my mind that I wanted to talk about on the podcast, but I just didn't write any of them down. So I sat down and I was like, what's my topic going to be? I'm like, I have no idea. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get into the comments, and that is going to make me remember and reignite all of my interest and sense about what we're going to talk about. The Knitting Wanderer said, somehow your advent mysteriously ended up in my shopping cart when I visited your site yesterday. Oops. Really though, I was not going to buy another advent for this year, but as soon as I saw your inspiration for it, I knew that I had to snag one. I just know that it will be stunning, and I can't wait to see what mine becomes. Awesome. Some of you mentioned doing the Diggory. The Diggory tee, even in the largest size, does not take the whole advent calendar. And I had a question about that. I can't remember if did I keep the question? I don't remember. Anyway, if you wanted to do a sweater that is not going to use all the yarn, you could just use a part of the mini skein to get up to the amount of yardage that you need of each mini skein, so that you would use all of it, the whole calendar. Or you could just start on day one and knit until the sweater is done, and that's when it's done. And it'll still be a fade, it just won't go all the way through the fade. And then you could use the rest for something else. I love big scraps. I'm really excited about my summer vibe leftovers because I think I can get another sweater out of this. I'm pretty sure I can. B. Nelson says, I don't know why, but I feel so inspired by your videos especially. I've gotten several ideas that I need to calculate yarn for so I can get busy. That is just the best compliment. Thank you so much, B. That was delightful. Sarah Forrester said, I just finished knitting the pressed flowers cowl and I love it. It was so enjoyable to make and I love the final product. I can't wait for colder weather so I can actually wear it. In the meantime, I think I will cast on a pressed flowers hat or maybe modify the pattern to make mittens. Congrats on graduation and confirmation. Thank you so much. Graduation was this week. Yeah, it's crazy. Time is going too fast. Too fast. It was funny. My daughter was sitting on the porch with her laptop and she's doing classes, college classes over the summer. And so she's working on that. And I was just listening to her humming. And I just remember, when she was 5 and I was homeschooling her, she would hum. And I thought, I wonder if she'll always hum. And she just still is at 18. Anyway, yeah, the pressed flowers looks really fun. I think mosaic knitting is really fun. It's so low stress and high output. Like what you get for it just looks so good, and you didn't have to work that hard for it because it's not even stranded knitting. It's really delightful. Art Theaters said, ooh, I love the faux set. I have knit 4 versions, 2 for my oldest daughter, 1 for my middle daughter, and a heavily modified version for my son. It turned out so cool. He gets compliments on it all the time. Okay, I'm gonna need to see that. Please send me a picture. If you don't want if I can share it on the podcast, let me know. If you don't want me to share it, that's fine. I'm sorry. But if I could share it, if you don't want his face in it or whatever, I could crop it out. But I would love to see the dude version of the faux set. That sounds awesome. She says, I plan on knitting one for myself in the future. It is a potato chippy pattern. It is, where it knits itself. Like, it's just so fun. You just want to keep knitting it. Ruth Ann Bull said, thanks for the podcast. You are so busy. I know, Ruth Ann. That's why I need a personal assistant. That's Gigi. She's my assistant. When I was pregnant with my second baby due in March, I designed a winter coat. It was beautiful, and oh my, the compliments. I moved the buttons over and wore it for a few years. I had people wanting to buy it. I got sick of it and threw it in the garbage. How dumb. Your June yarn is beautiful, and I may have to order. I'm using from my stash, LOL. Take care and have a fantastic week. I totally get that. I have sweaters that I knit that I would just donate to Goodwill, and because I've gotten hand knit sweaters at Goodwill before, and it's just amazing for me. And so I think, well, maybe somebody will get it who appreciates it as much as I did. Another Ruth says, Petite Knit has a sweater with a button band knit with the front. I think it's the Copenhagen cardigan. I don't like picking up stitches for the button band. Sometimes they don't come out well. Yes, this is totally legit. A lot of times designers will say something like, pick up 2 stitches for every 3 rows, because knit stitches are rectangles. They're not squares, sadly. If they were squares, our lives would be easier. There's a cardigan that I made when I was a new knitter, and it has a curved hem. And so you would pick up the stitches all the way around the whole edge of the cardigan. And I did this so many times, and every time they came out badly. And I don't know why. I mean, I was a new knitter, and when you go around a curve, you have to, I don't even know the best way to do it to make it lay right, but it never did. So yeah, it can be problematic. Yeah. Julie Brown says, Devin, when you put your viewers' stunning Audrey sweater up, it reminded me I would love, love, love to know how to make a DK version of this sweater. It is truly one of my favorite classic sweaters. I would love to make a DK weight for summer. Up a pattern size, down a needle size, help. P.S. I love the podcast on Saturday. I love it on Saturday too. Saturday is great for me. Julie, this topic is such a good question that it is going to be my topic of the week. Thank you so much. We'll get to that in a minute. Melissa Emery said, I'm so excited. I ordered your advent. It will be my first and I can't wait. Yay! I'm so excited. Rachel Bonner said, I think your June color of the month combined with Bosque or Jovis would be good. That's the white. Or Black Forest cake would make a beautiful pressed flowers item. The Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks podcast has a whole series on the techniques in the pressed flowers patterns that I found very helpful. Thanks for another helpful podcast. Lori Noland says, I always enjoy your podcast and look forward to it every week. So here is my burning question. Last year, I missed out on your 4th of July yarn. I was crushed. I've been waiting for a full year for you to put out a 4th of July colorway. Are you doing that this year? Will this be July's color of the month? I don't remember how that worked last year. And I thought that was an excellent question. And I responded and I said, I kind of love the idea of July's color of the month being a patriotic colorway. Lots of things get a whole month. Maybe July can be patriotic month. So be looking for that in July. Patriotic color will be the color of the month, and I'll have it all month long. Doesn't that sound great? I love patriotic yarn. In fact, I didn't do an In the Wild segment, although this is kind of a little tiny In the Wild segment. Sarah Nuggebauer, who shared a story years ago now on the podcast, she is knitting a patriotic top, and I forget which pattern she's using. I think it's a tank top, in the Fiji fingering weight in Jovis, Valentine, and Fathom, which is red, white, and blue. When I packaged it up for her, I was like, ooh, can't wait to see what this becomes. And she put it on Instagram, and it is so, so beautiful. Okay, topic of the week, changing the yarn weight of a sweater. Now, when I originally wrote this, I said that there were two main approaches one might take. But the more I think about it, I feel that there's the two approaches, and then there's everything in the middle. It really depends on how good a knitter you are, how much you care about precise size. Like if you're open to it not being the exact size, then you can go with the more right brain approach. It's basically the right brain approach and the left brain approach, but there's everything in the middle too. So I'll start with the right brain approach, and that's essentially winging it. If you are a good knitter and you're a good guesser, I'm a good guesser. I tend to wing stuff a lot, and it works out for me because I make good guesses. It's funny, we have a joke in my house. I hung these 3 mirrors up, and when you hang something on the wall in a group of 3, they have to be hung perfectly. Equidistant, all level, all at the same height, right? And it was the kind of thing where it had like, they're mirrors, and they have like iron around them, so they're heavy, not iron, but metal. And so they're heavy, and I think there were 2 holes, so I had to put in 2 nails to hang these things, okay? So I carefully measured, and as I'm hanging up the middle one, I adjusted it. My husband was like, why did you move it? You measured. I was like, yeah, but I had to adjust it. He's like, that doesn't make sense. I'm like, I know. So then I hung it, and it was perfect. And he was like, I don't get that at all. That's because I am the right brain artist, and he is the left brain tech person. If you measured, then there's no adjusting it. You don't adjust it. It's perfect because you measured. But sometimes it's not. I don't know why. It just isn't. So if you are a good guesser, you can kind of wing it. Kind of like what Julie said. You can say, well, this is a worsted weight pattern. The Argh is a worsted weight pattern, and I want to do a DK version. So I'm going to take my needle size down to a DK, and I'm going to go up a pattern size or 2. You could totally do that, and that would be legit. However, if you wanted to do a little bit more math, and in doing the math, I found that winging it idea is exactly what I would do on the left brain approach. Even when I did the math, what I just said, go down a needle size and up a pattern size, I think I went down 2 needle sizes and up 2 pattern sizes, and I got what I want. So the right brain approach is not for new knitters. If you are a new knitter, I would just find a pattern that has the yarn weight you want, and you need to get that knitting under your belt so that you have a better understanding of the math that I'm about to explain. So we'll use the Argh pattern as an example, since that's the one Julie asked about. That's a worsted weight pattern, and she wants to go to DK. It's not a big jump, all right? So the Argh pattern changes gauge because we want the neckline to be a tighter gauge so that it stays on your shoulders and is just more tightly knit. So Argh starts with a US 5, and then it changes to a 6, and by the body of the sweater and the sleeves, you're at a US 7. And that is a good way to increase the size of your garment without adding increased stitches. Just go up a needle size. Now for DK, off the top of my head, like you think worsted using a US 7, because that's the gauge that you use to get gauge, that's the gauge needle. It says that in the pattern. For DK, I'd probably use a 5. So instead of the 5, 6, and 7 I would use for worsted, I would say, let's say I want to do a 3, 4, and 5. US 3, US 4, US 5 size needle. So first thing we do is we print the schematic. This is a part of the pattern, and it has all of the measurements. So what I'm about to explain now, you can do as much of it as you want. I'm gonna explain the easiest way to do it, okay? So you have the measurements. Then you're gonna knit your swatch. So I guessed, and let's say size 5 needle is the size I'm gonna use for DK to see what gauge I get. So let's say I knit my swatch and I get 19 stitches equals 4 inches. That's kind of a common gauge for DK on a size 5, for me anyway. So that is 4.75 stitches per inch using the yarn and needle that I want to use. Now the pattern calls for 17 stitches over 4 inches, which is 4.25 stitches per inch. So for every 4 inches, there's a difference of 2 stitches. Okay, it's a half a stitch per inch difference. So let's say I'm making the third size of the Argh. The third size of the Argh, the finished circumference is 43.25 inches. I hope this makes sense. That's the circumference for the third size, okay? Now, if I want my finished sweater to be that size and each inch is 4.25 stitches, that's approximately 205 body stitches at the bust, okay? Now with worsted, the third size only has 184 stitches at the bust. So then I looked at the fourth size. The fourth size has 196 and the fifth size has 212. And so what I want is kind of in the middle of those. Now, what you could do is re-engineer the pattern to get your 205, or you could make that an even number. Even numbers are easier to work with. You make 204 or 206 stitches. Or you could just knit the fourth size or the fifth size, because the fourth size has 9 fewer stitches and the fifth size has 7 more stitches. So what I did was I went down 2 needle sizes, and probably I'd go up to the fifth size, and I went up 2 pattern sizes. So the math checked out my original thought of, what if I, because for DK, you'd probably use a 5. If this is the gauge that I'm probably gonna get, I'd go up a size or 2. So that's not always going to work, but it's a good start. Does that help? And this is kind of the dumbed down version. Now, the true left brain person would rework the pattern, would take all the measurements that they want and rework the pattern to have the number of stitches that they want in each place: the sleeve, circumference, the bust, the neck, whatever. But I don't think you really need to do that much math. A good place to start is at the bust measurement. Check the size that you want and figure out the gauge you have and how many stitches you're going to need around the bust, and see which size has about that many stitches. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Okay? Good. Let's move on to knitting fantasies. So I know I have languishing lips. We've been talking about it. I'm not really inspired by them right now. I kind of want to start something new. So that's chairs moving around on the deck. Caitlin Hunter has so many great patterns. And I looked her up on Ravelry, and I found that I couldn't find a lot of her sweaters. There's one in particular I've loved ever since she put it out. It's called Balshan, and that's on my list today. So it wasn't there. It wasn't on Ravelry. Ravelry had 15 sweater patterns. And I was like, that's weird. So I did a search, and she has her own website, and they're all on there, which I found interesting that she didn't put them all on Ravelry. I don't know what that means. But this sweater, Balshan, I cannot tell you how much I love it. It is so gorgeous and interesting. It is a fingering weight sweater, and the color work that looks kind of like feathers, she held together 2 strands of, I think she said mohair or sari silk. I don't know, it's magpie feather. So whatever that is, it's either mohair or sari silk. lace weight that she held together to make it fluffy. Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. I love this. So this is definitely on my list. I think it's knit. I don't know. I don't know how this thing is constructed, but I think it's sideways rather than up and down, but I'm not 100% sure. And the other one that I have loved for a really long time is the Jupiter crop. And she designed this because she has a rooster called Jupiter, and it kind of looks like feathers. It's really pretty. So I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to use my leftovers from my summer vibe. Jupiter uses 5 colors and it's a sport weight. So this is another instance of changing the weight of the yarn to go with what you want. So my bust measurement is 35. And so I thought all I would probably do, and I didn't look at the needle size. I'll probably adjust the needle size as well, but I'll probably just go up to the 3rd size, which gives you a 38.5 inch circumference. We'll see. And again, I'm not 100% wed to that, but I feel like, I didn't write this down, but I feel like the largest yardage is 1 full skein. So I will need, or I could change the way I do the colors because this is a 5-color sweater, but I could make it 6 colors. I would definitely do these 3, Fontaine, Trinket, and Dusty, because I love these 3 together. So if I added 2 more, Bosque for sure. It's hard to show. So Bosque, Fontaine, Dusty, Trinket, and then maybe Beryl. Oh, that's connected. Oh gosh, wouldn't that be so pretty? And it'd be like feathers. Oh my gosh, I would love it. So if I do decide to do that, I'll keep you updated on what I do for needle size and how I adjust it, because it's a sport weight sweater. I want to use a fingering weight. I don't think it's going to be difficult at all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down a needle size or 2. Again, I didn't look to see what it used. And I'm going to go up a pattern size or 2. So, okay, let's get to So Here's What Happened. Today's story comes to us from Pamela. Hi, Pamela. She says, I am 65 years old, and when I was a little girl, I desperately wanted to learn to knit. At this time, it was late 60s, early 70s. Living in Northwest Tennessee, there were no yarn shops, I know. There was no internet. I didn't know anyone who knitted. My mother was an avid crocheter, but I really wanted to learn to knit. One day I got on the school bus and there was a high school girl named Sandra knitting. She and her family had moved to Tennessee from up north and she could knit. She graciously offered to teach me if I would get needles and yarn. We were really poor, but my mother and I went to Fred's dollar store and she bought me a set of boy aluminum needles and I picked out some brown yarn. Of course, 60s and 70s especially, brown was like the color, right? Sandra taught me to cast on and the knit stitch, and I knitted the wonkiest brown scarf ever, but I was so proud of it. It took me a long time. Soon after that, I figured out that I needed to learn the purl stitch, but by then Sandra had moved away. I bought a little book that had line drawings of knitting stitches, and after much trial and error, I figured out the purl stitch and I made a neon lime green poncho. So 70s, Pamela. I bet it was awesome. I loved it. It was a garment and I felt very accomplished, although some may have questioned my color choice. Not then. 1972, I bet that lime green, I don't know if it was 1972, but 70s, that lime green poncho was like the it thing. She says, by then I was in middle school. Fast forward many years to 1982 and I got married. I had knitted off and on, but not very much since the poncho. My husband learned that I could knit and he was amazed. He had never known anyone who could knit. Since we were newly married and I was so in love, I offered to knit something for him. He chose socks. I had only ever knit with 2 needles, but I knew I would need at least 4 double-pointed needles and sock yarn. In 1982, in Northwest Tennessee, there was still no local yarn shop and no internet. So I went to Walmart and bought boy aluminum DPNs and the smallest yarn I could find, which was also acrylic, which would be good for socks though. I knew this was not a good yarn for socks, but it was all I could get. Then I got my knitting book out and learned to make socks using the only pattern I had, which was from the 1960s. I knitted the socks and my husband was very proud. Yep, they made his feet sweat and they were kind of wonky, but he wore them. He was in love too. I love it. In 2000, while recuperating from surgery, I had turned to knitting to keep busy, and I've been an avid knitter ever since. I've knit many things, among them dozens of pairs of socks. Today, in Northwest Tennessee, there is a somewhat local yarn store, and there's the internet where I can get great tools and yarn. And YouTube has pretty much replaced my Learn to Knit book. That's so true. You can learn anything on YouTube. She says, I look forward each week to your podcast. I really appreciate all the work you put into it and love to hear knitting stories. Me too, Pamela. If you have a knitting story, please send it to me. But I wanted to show you this pair of socks that she knit, the brown pair, the ones that she made for her husband. And they look pretty good. I'm impressed. It's heel flap and gusset, looks like. Yeah, looks super good, Pamela. Awesome. Yeah, that is a great story. And actually, it made me remember one of the things that I wanted to tell you about that happened this week. So I order my yarn bases from a distributor. And this distributor is only like 2 hours from my house. And this is where a lot of dyers get their yarn, okay? So I placed a really, really big order and shipping was like $300. And I was like, that's crazy. I'm like, it's only 2 hours away. Why don't I just go pick it up? So I drove down there and I got to meet all the guys who worked there and they were so nice. And the guy who runs it, he was probably about 60. And he said he'd been doing this since he was 20. And I said, you must love how much the knitting industry has kicked up. He goes, oh yeah. He said about 10 years ago, everything just blew up and just, he had so much interest in the yarn. And he's like, it has been so great. He has this, his US warehouse is 2 hours from me. He also has one in the UK and one in the Netherlands, which makes me think we're all using the same yarn bases. All the dyers are using the same yarn bases. But I got to see the warehouse and meet the guys who pack stuff up. They do such a good job. It was really interesting and fun. The yarn comes from Peru, and it was just really interesting and cool. I really enjoyed it. So when I place big orders, I'm going to be driving down there rather than, and my husband and I often go to Culpeper, and we have to go through Culpeper to get there. So we'll be making a date out of it as time goes on. Thank you so much for joining me. I would love to share your knitting story on my podcast. Please send it to me, Devin at KnittyMcPurly.com. I hope you have a wonderful week. I hope you can get out and knit in public today, and I will see you next week. Bye, knitters.